Collier County was like big time drug smuggling. Everglades City, all those stories, all the things that have come up.
It's a lot of activity. I mean, we worked nonstop for several years. And here was another trick. They get the dope. There was so much money in importation of bale marijuana back in those days. And these guys were running full speed at night, no lights. Number one, you're going to jail. Number two, I'll try to answer any question, but please be a gentleman. I'll be a gentleman.
Welcome, 239 Uncensored, everything Southwest Florida and beyond. And we have an outstanding episode, a great guest, a good friend of mine, retired Captain Tom Storrar. Tom Storrar, welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Tim. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. And I say retired captain now. I just want to give you a little bit of background on Tom Storrar. He's probably been through every rank all the way up to the undersheriff at the sheriff's office. Retired last year a little bit.
Last December.
How long do you have in law enforcement, Tom?
Well, I started with the Highway Patrol Reserve Force in 1970, but I came full-time with the sheriff's office in 1972. So I was with the sheriff's office almost 50 years.
I Collier County Sheriff's Office. Now, how big was the sheriff's office when you first started?
I think we had maybe 60 of us, including the secretaries. I can tell you on the west side of Collier, North Naples, Golden Gate, and East Naples, there was only one car per district back then and one supervisor. So there's four of us on a shift. And a lot of times if we had somebody in sick, there was only two of you. And back in the 70s, I have worked this whole county by myself on the midnight shift, was the only car out.
Unbelievable.
Every substation.
2,025 square miles. It's like, yeah, it's crazy.
It's huge.
It's crazy.
It's huge.
Now, the reason why, for obvious reasons with your experience, and we're gonna have you back on again, I know for a fact. But one of the reasons people often ask me, hey, listen, I heard that Collier County was like big time drug smuggling, Everglades City, all those stories, all the things that have come up. That's why we want to bring you, because you were in the middle of it. You were in the heart about it. We'll talk a little bit about it. Now, for those of you who are listening on the podcast, we have a video. It's going to be on YouTube. Just a short clip, and we got several pictures, so make sure you go on there. But I want to run this little video real quick before we get started. It's kind of cool. It's really...
Arrest stemmed from a 2-year undercover investigation that led to 149 earlier arrests and the seizure of nearly 500,000 pounds of marijuana.
We don't have shoot-em-ups over drugs or gangland killings or anything like that. Like I said, they're breaking the law, but they're not violent criminals.
These are your next-door neighbors, the people you were born and raised with, and they're just typical American people.
I think that some of the townspeople felt that it was unfair, but I can tell you that a number of other people felt that it was long overdue and needed to be corrected because the men had gone into an illegal commodity and needed to be fixed.
If they would have left it alone and left it small, they would have eventually got busted, but not the way that they did. Because a lot of them actually didn't get busted. They got told on or narked out or ratted on or snitched on. We have many names.
Wow. Does that video clip bring back some good memories?
Oh, yeah.
When I say good, I mean, it was a tough times working.
Yeah. There was a lot of activity. I mean, we worked nonstop for several years on the situation there.
Now, let's go back. The drug smuggling started when?
I will tell you, in one of the pictures that I gave you, it shows a picture. It's a black and white picture of several bales of marijuana outside of the old sheriff's office. Yes, that's me on the left. The interesting thing is the gentleman in the white shirt and tie at the time, that was Captain Chuck Whidden. He was the head of CID. The uniformed officer on the right is Russ Davis. He was a member of the agency. That started our smuggling. Now, those bales that you saw, they were retrieved from the Naples airport. We had back then it was Customs.
City of Naples Airport, not Everglades. City of Naples. Wow.
Airport. They dropped that load in two spots. They dropped it at the north end of the City of Naples Airport. They dropped the other part of the load in a little development off of Rattlesnake Hammock Road called Wing South.
Yes.
And we got half the load there and half the load off the airport. And the interesting thing about it is I was in uniform at the time. This is 1972.
Okay, so let's get the date.
Yeah, it was 1972. And I had a brand new assistant state attorney who was involved with us on that, who became a circuit court judge up in Charlotte County, and he's now since retired, but he was in my car with me. We sat there probably all night and part of the next day. We were not able to make any arrests because of the smugglers at that time were out of Miami. We did seize the dope. And in my opinion, that started the ball rolling we started seeing the importation of bale marijuana into the southwest coast of Florida.
So when do we start seeing it to be like, hey, this is a problem? Things are getting out of control. We knew back then Collier County was just vast areas, you know. When was it, when did it start to impact locals and things like that? Or?
I'd say we really started seeing the impact where we felt that we were overpowered with the manpower, probably around 1975, 1976. Air smuggling. It started out with air smuggling.
Okay.
Because 70% of the Everglades is in Collier County. And the famous method, if you will, was two methods. They would either fly an airplane in and land it off of the area of Everglades Boulevard south of I-75, now in those streets that take off of that. The other issue they would do is they would fly a large cargo plane in out over the Everglades, and they would literally fly low and slow and kick the bales out in a straight line. And then the violators would take swamp buggies and four-wheelers and go out and pick them up. Well, I can't tell you how many nights we spent out in the Everglades picking up bale marijuana that had been dropped. All of this stuff came out of Miami,
okay.
the Miami-Fort Lauderdale area. I even arrested a pilot that was a Marine Corps Vietnam pilot.
No kidding.
And he got involved with them. We arrested him. He literally flew an airplane into the Everglades, dropped the stuff out, and landed back in Miami. He was making a reasonable amount of salary, but the violators offered him $50,000 for 24 hours worth of work. And when they met with him
in 72, 74, 75.
Yeah, no, this was later.
A little bit later.
Late 70s,
Okay.
78, 79, somewhere around there. They met with him in a restaurant in Miami, and he had never flown a DC-3 before. DC-3 is a cargo plane, the old DC-3s that we used to run around.
Yeah, I think we have a picture of one.
We have a picture of one, yeah. And you know, the military version of that was a C-47. There's a DC. Wow. That's a DC-3.
And where's that plane at right there?
That's off Everglades Boulevard. and you see that? You see how narrow that street is?
Yeah, that's Everglades Boulevard.
They landed that plane on that street.
Remember, if you're listening to this on the podcast, make sure to go to the Facebook page or YouTube and see this plane. It's incredible.
Yeah, you've got to see it. And here was another trick. The violators would land these airplanes and they just walk off and leave them. They get the dope. There was so much money in importation of bale marijuana back in those days. They just leave it. Or they'd crash it. Several photographs. I've got crashed airplanes off Everglades Boulevard and all that. So in the late 70s and up into the early 80s, we got so good at intercepting those airplanes. We worked back in those days. It was DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, and U.S. Customs Air Support out of Homestead Air Force Base. Okay. What the violators didn't know is at that time I had a customs radio in my car, and I could call Customs Miami sector. And they would call me. And if they had an airplane inbound, a lot of times they would follow them in with their air assets, either a Black Hawk helicopter or a Citation jet or something like that. And they would follow them in, and I could talk to the aircraft as they were coming in. So we got good at that. So during the 80s, we actually posed as offloaders to direct airplanes into Everglades Boulevard area. Actually, in north on DeSoto Boulevard, we actually took planes off.
So where DeSoto sits right now,
yeah,
in the intersection of Golden Gate Boulevard and DeSoto, right. Was that the area these planes were landing?
Yeah, northwest of that.
Northwest
of that. And
unbelievable.
If you go north of Oil Well Grade off DeSoto, you've got some of those roads that go back in there. Yeah, we've had planes. We directed planes in there. Most of our activity was south of the alley off Everglades Boulevard.
Yeah, right. South blocks.
South blocks.
Yeah. Now, how many bales would these planes drop?
Well, for an example, the DC-3 that I showed you there, probably that aircraft would hold maxed out of 5,000 to 7,000 pounds.
Wow.
We did take off, and I do have a case that I worked with, which was a DC-6. That was a huge 4-engine aircraft. They landed in the Everglades north of Monroe Station and just left it. We estimated that load was about 15,000 pounds.
Wow. Now, where we know it kind of come over from Miami, but where did it originate? Columbia or
Columbia.
South
Columbia.
America?
Everything was out of Cartagena, Colombia, that we were dealing with.
Okay. Now, would it come straight from Cartagena and then drop, or would it come to Miami, settle there, and then come over?
Straight in.
But it would kind of be coordinated through Miami dealers, right?
Yeah. The most of the importers, if you will, for Miami, they would coordinate it. They had the Colombian connection. We actually got so good at it. We were talking to some of the growers in South America on high frequency radio. We had a high frequency radio set up, and we could talk to them back and forth. And we set up a couple of deals. Later on, during Operation Everglades, we switched to marine smuggling, boats, lots of boats. We got so good at that if we had a case going and we had an informant that was working with us and hooked us up with the smuggler who was out of Miami, we would take front money and we would rent a shrimp boat, and then we would go down and we would meet the Colombian freighter off the coast of Mexico or Colombia, take the load on, bring the load back up, and offload it off the southwest coast of Florida into the smaller boats, and then we would follow that all the way to Miami.
Wow. And because they knew all the 10,000 islands, they knew how to get in. And now in learning a little bit about it, there was the federal and state park that came in, right? The federal park that came in, and that took a lot of their livelihood away from. That's what they said. And they basically transformed or transitioned into this. They're like, hey, we gotta feed our family.
Right. Yeah. And here's what happened with that. The feds, they shut down fishing in the park. A lot of commercial fishing was either controlled or shut down into the park. So, you take a commercial fisherman, he's maybe making $15,000, $19,000 a year, trying to make a living. And you get these guys from Miami, particularly Hispanics, that would come over, that would have the Colombian connection, and they can sit down with this commercial fisherman and say, look, you've got a fishing boat. If you would go out one night and you'd bring in 4,000 or 5,000 pounds, and there's a picture in there of one of the boats that we seized with about 4,000 pounds on it.
Yeah. If we have that one, I'm sure we get it.
Yeah. I'll pay you 50,000, 60. Yeah. That's it right there. That's about 5,000 pounds on that boat.
Wow.
It's I think that's a 28-foot flat boat. They offer them $50,000 for one night's work. And what they would do is they would give them a down payment and say $10,000. So the fisherman takes the $10,000 cash. He doesn't have to worry about it. He runs the load comes in, and then the trafficker would come back and say, well, all the load didn't get through. I can't pay all that money, but I got another load working. Can you do that? And I'll pay you again. And they give him some more money. So what they did is they reeled in these fishermen that using their boats. And, I've interviewed some of them where they were owed several $100,000. And the traffickers knew that they could just keep going, and they give them a little bit each time, a little bit each time. Now, some of them did make big money. Mm-hmm. We had large cash seizures during Everglades City once we made the arrest. But they're making 15 to 19,000. The trafficker comes in and says, "Here's 50 grand. Here's $10,000 right now. I'll give you the rest as soon as the load gets through."
Yeah. And they're like, yeah, they're like working. They need that money. That's $10,000, and especially back in those days. Yeah. And for something that they in a whole year that they might make, the same numbers in a whole year. So it's amazing. Yeah. And they really were the only ones. I worked at Florida Marine Patrol way back, and I kind of knew the waters a little bit. Yeah. But those guys are the ones that really knew the waters. Yeah. I mean, they knew all the ins and outs.
Oh, they do. They knew. As you know. In that area, the Everglades City, 10,000 Islands, Juckalesky area. If you don't know where you're going to hit an oyster bar.
You're done.
You're gonna tear the bottom out of your boat. And these guys were running full speed at night, no lights. And we had a Marine Patrol deputy that could run that same thing. He grew up on the water, and he could run those whole back channels, everything at night. And I sometimes 30, 40 miles an hour with lights out. And he knew exactly where we were going.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, they knew the area. It was the geographical knowledge of how to get in and how to get out. They knew the deep water areas where to hide boats. And the mangroves, as you know, the mangroves are so thick, you can hide a boat back in there and never see it from the air. It was totally camouflaged.
And once the load would come in, it would get put on trucks in Everglades City, and then it would be
transported,
over to Miami, and then from there distribution.
Sometimes they would piecemeal it.
Right.
They'd be a couple 1,000 pounds at a time, and they would head over to Miami. They used a lot of vans that would do that, and we also were able to figure out the vans that they used were unmarked vans. They had air shocks. They had all the windows darkened out. They had a bulkhead painted black between the seats and the back cargo portion of the van, and the van would never come back registered to them, to the driver.
Right.
And they would transport the stuff from Everglades City to Miami. I actually got involved and stopped one of those vans with the help of the Highway Patrol, and it had 28 bales in it. They sued us, and ultimately they lost the lawsuit. They said we didn't have probable cause or any of that stuff, and it went to the federal court, and the federal courts threw it out.
Yeah, no. Now we know this is a big part of the history of Collier County.
Yes.
The fact behind it. How did it impact the sheriff's office and our relationships with the community? And I mean, there's just a lot of things. I was a little bit of a part of it at the end when I went to teach DARE at Everglades schools as a deputy, and the young kids really didn't like deputies at the time because we had put their family members. I go, I didn't have any part of it, but that's kind of interesting.
No, we were not really welcome in Everglades City.
What percentage of people who got arrested? Right, tell me a little bit.
Yeah, we arrested a lot of people. I think, majority of the fishermen, they were either involved or they knew about it and didn't say anything. I understand the culture there. Everglades has kind of been that way. I think if you dig back in time, there's a long history of smuggling and importation. I'm told that at one time it could have been weapons, it could have been whiskey, it could have been sugar, stuff like that. I think there's a book out called Up for Grabs that's published. I read a copy of it years ago. It's kind of, I don't know, kind of like the mentality you have sometimes like in Key West that, just leave us alone. Don't bother us.
Yeah, we're down here. Leave us alone.
Yeah, we weren't going to do that. We had to do something. We estimated during the time we started Operation Everglades in 1981, and the reason we started that is we were just getting bombarded with importation cases. We didn't have the assets. There was only like 3 or 4 of us in the. We were overpowered. We were getting called out all the time. So what we did is we appealed, and I remember going in 1981, I remember taking a trip to Miami DEA office with the then Sheriff Aubrey Rogers. And we met with the special agent in charge of DEA, and we laid out all of our history as to how bad it was over here on the west coast of Florida. So DEA said, all right, we're going to come over and we're going to do a 90-day intelligence gathering effort in the southwest coast of Florida. That 90 days turned into what's still the DEA task force in Fort Myers today.
No kidding.
Yeah, that was the nucleus, if you will. The task force, first of all, was based in Collier. When we did Operation Everglades, we had DEA, U.S. Customs, Florida Marine Patrol, IRS was a big help.
Yeah, I can imagine. Everything's linked to that.
Everything was linked to money. And they did a really, really good job of identifying how the money was tracked, doing all that. We did work a little bit with the military. We even tested anti-smuggling aircraft for the Australian government. And it was interesting. I was with Customs, and they brought an Australian airplane in, and they wanted to put it off the coast of Naples just to test to see what we could do. And lo and behold, we found floating bales off the coast, about 10 miles off the coast, unknown to us. I mean, and a lot of times 1 or 2 bales would go overboard. they wouldn't even worry about it. It would just float up. And we used to catch, we would call them floaters. We used to get a lot of those from time to time when they had a big load coming in.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the nitty gritty. Anything get really hairy and scary and,
yeah, I can
dangerous?
I can tell you one situation, and this was in the late 80s. We had information that a load of cocaine. Now we switched from probably around 85, maybe 84, 85. We switched from bale marijuana into cocaine, or a combination of both, because the cocaine weighed less, was higher value, and you could get it in easier. So we had information that a load was coming in out of off of I-75 into a location off of Turner River Road, which is a dirt road, out in eastern Collier County. So we knew that it was coming in, so we set up on it. Well, that case, I don't know if you've there's a movie out with Tom Cruise in it that portrays a pilot by the name of Barry Seal. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's a regular full screen movie.
Full screen.
Tom Cruise plays Barry Seal.
Okay.
That load that we brought in, it was coke, and we got the load. We also got in a shootout with the Colombians because they sent a hit squad with them. That load was the load that precipitated Barry Seal to start cooperating with the U.S. government, DEA. He became an informant, but Barry Seal was working both sides of the fence. He was doing some stuff for himself, and he was doing something for the government. I think the movie's called American Made, but I'm not sure about that. But that's the story of Barry Seal. That was his load. He was the pilot of the airplane that we took off. We didn't get the airplane. We got the material. Most of the guys got away. We did get a shootout. We're not sure if we hit some of them or not, but we did. We got their cars and we got the load.
Wow, that's crazy. Now, in your capacity working with the task force, right, and
Correct.
working for the Collier County Sheriff's Office,
Correct.
Give me an example of what a night would be, just sitting waiting for these planes and the mosquitoes and the Everglades. I mean, you probably don't want to remember all that.
Yeah, we would sit sometimes 2, 3, 4 days waiting on a load to come in 24/7. We'd have relief come in. We'd have bring in people from Miami. And the bugs were terrible. You tried to use bug spray with DEET. You'd bug screen, throw a net over your head. If you're especially if you're out in the woods, it was pretty long sleeves, and it was hot during the summer. See, the harvest season down there usually started in August. Okay. July, August is when the plant would get to that point of where they could harvest it, and then they would harvest it, dry it, and compress it and pack it. And that's the picture that you've got there of that one compressed bale. Yeah, the one, if you can bring that compressed bale up, it's kind of neat because you were telling me about the trash compactors. We haven't had those in the United States for a while. I mean, I don't know if you got one, but it's kind of neat. Tell the story about that. We're looking at a picture of a condensed bale. And again, go on Facebook, check it out. Check out the video on YouTube as well. Yeah, the smuggler in Colombia loved trash compactors because they could put all the dried vegetable material in there and keep compacting it and compacted, and pretty soon you get that square package. There would be 2 of those per bale, and then they would wrap it in brown paper, and then they would put that in burlap. Okay. Something like coffee beans would come in, or goods out of Colombia. You would all say, and those bales probably they would have 2 of those package compartments, and they could weigh 40, 50, 60 pounds. And if they got wet, they weighed a lot more. Now, if they floated and they were in the water for a while, a couple of guys said, hey, we took it and dried it out and sold it. Yes. It was not damaged in any way, really. It wasn't the same potency. Right. Some of it, depending on how they dried it, some of it would have mildew in it. It would be pretty nasty stuff. Yeah. But they would grab it and try to sell it at a reduced rate. Yeah. Now, people are going to ask me, and when you got those bales, did you have like a burn operation, that type of thing? That must have been crazy. Well, two things. Get upwind. If we were going to go to state court, we would get the load and say we got 20,000 pounds, which was a pretty average load back in those days. We would have to sample every bale, take it to the lab, and make sure that it tested as cannabis in the lab. And once we did that, and once the case was over, we would have to do a destruction order by the court. The court would allow us to do a destruction order. Then we would take it to an incinerator, one in Fort Myers, but they made us quit because we burnt the incinerator inside the incinerator out because it was so hot. So then we had to take it to St. Petersburg, and we would burn the stuff there. Now, if we were going to federal case, we would have to get all of the packaged stuff up, load it up into a huge truck, and take it to the warehouse in Miami, where they would process it and they would destruct it at the federal level. And I don't know how they destructed their stuff. You had to get a destruction order from the court to get rid of it. And some of it, and sometimes we would burn it here. What happened was we used the dump. We would dig a huge hole in the dump, in the ground, and then we would put marijuana, wood, diesel fuel, marijuana, wood, diesel fuel, and then we would light it, and we would try to burn it all out. Well, what would happen is sometimes we wouldn't get it all burnt, and these guys that were rather creative, they would go back out and dig the hole up, and they would try to salvage the pot that had the diesel fuel on it, and it became known on the street as diesel pot.
No kidding.
And Lord knows what it did to the interior lining of your lugs when you smoked pot with diesel fuel soaked on it, but it was sold as diesel pot.
Yeah.
So we had to quit that. That's when we started using the incinerator.
Yeah, wouldn't work. A little bit about you and law enforcement. So you made, how many arrests did you guys, I mean, out of the total population of Everglades City, how many people do you
I would
think went to prison?
I would estimate
or
at
got
that
arrested?
time. Oh, yeah, probably over 100.
Yeah.
We probably arrested more than that.
Mostly the males down there, right?
Yeah. It was based on the commercial fishermen,
right,
and the people that got involved in it. I think it was at that time probably well known in Everglades City of what was going on, and they estimated a large amount. DEA estimated a large amount of the imported marijuana came in through the southwest coast of Florida, and I'm talking all the way from Marathon in the Keys all the way up to Sarasota. I mean, we took loads off up in Charlotte County. We took loads off in Lee County, and most of it, though, we took off here in Collier or off the coast of Collier.
During your time in law enforcement, I'm sure you have run into some of these people that you had dealt with, because the feeling I get for the most part is like, hey, law enforcement's got a job, we got a job.
Oh yeah.
Do you ever run into anybody?
I've read into some people that I've arrested, and they've been cordial. I mean, they knew we had a job to do, and they had a job to do. They got caught, and we were the ones. And I always told people when we arrested them, if you want to consider yourself a gentleman, I'll treat you like a gentleman. If you don't, then we'll have to use whatever necessary tools that we have to accommodate you. But number one, you're going to jail. Number two, I'll try to answer any question that you have, but please be a gentleman. I'll be a gentleman. And most of them did. I've had guys turn me in through attorneys. We had an attorney here in town that turned a group in, turned 5 of them in at one time, and he would only turn them in to me, because he knew I would treat them with respect, but they were still going to jail.
Right. I got
it. And
then,
then, they'll sort it out in court when they go to court.
Yeah. And I run into that a lot over the years. I've arrested a lot of people, gang members, mostly. And I run into them to this day, and, they're like, hey, Deputy G, how's it going? You changed my life, or, I got kids now. I'm out of the gang world.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I could say over the years, I, totally have been respectful of everybody. And again, I put it in the control of the, of the subject that I'm arresting. Hey, you got a job, I got a job. Let's get through that. But yours, I know that even to this day, Everglades City and the whole community is kind of like a folk story.
It is.
That is true.
Yeah, it is true.
Yeah, so they're pretty, and looking at it, they're pretty proud of the, of the, I don't want to use the word proud, but their heritage and how they were tough, and they survived and lived through it.
In my opinion, and I'm no sociologist or anything, but I think it's ingrained in their culture. It's been done for so many years, and they just think, it's okay to do that. I've had discussions with guys that I arrested that got mad at me and said we had no business being there. And I said, well, we are here. This is going to happen. So let's get, like you said, let's get through it, and we'll go from there.
One of the things too is, and I was listening and talking to some people, the sentencing was different. Like some people really locked in, didn't tell anybody, narc on anybody, snitch on anybody. They got a little bit harder sentencing.
Yeah.
The people who kind of flipped, enrolled, and helped out, they got some reduced sentencing.
Yeah, in a way that's work is if we had a cooperating individual that we'd arrested, he had a defense attorney, and that defense attorney at that time, everything we did during Operation Everglades was federal. We would get the U.S. Attorney's Office out of Miami involved with their defense attorney, and we would strike up what was called a cooperative agreement document. In other words, their defendant would do A, B, C, and D and cooperate with us. And once they locked in on that, and then once we would debrief that person, depending on what they did, we would keep, obviously a great chronology of what that individual did. At the time of sentencing, we would present that material to the federal U.S. District Court judge in Miami, and then it would be up to the court to determine, does the guy get 10 years? Does he get 15 years? Does he get probation? Does he get 2 years? It was up to the judge, but we had to articulate a well-founded basis for consideration on behalf of the judge as to how they sentenced that individual. And that's kind of how that worked.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And talking to some of the guys that have been through it, the federal system at the time, for some of them was like, yeah, that was pretty, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't, nothing's obviously nice when you're locked up and your liberties are taken away. But they said that the federal, some of them did, a year, some of them did 3 years, some of them did 7 years.
In my opinion, some of those federal correction facilities are like a country club.
That's what some of them say,
We had to go to debrief an individual in the Miami Corrections Federal. And there was myself, my DEA partner, and an assistant U.S. attorney. And we wanted to talk to this individual who, by the way, the person that we talked to, he ran the largest load in Everglades City that we ever took, 52 tons.
Wow.
102,000 pounds.
So how many bales would that be?
1,700.
1,700 bales.
1,700 bales in one guy. And he had a 6th grade education, lived over on the east coast of Florida. He was in jail. He wanted to talk to us. So we went over and we checked into the Correctional Institute, and they had counselors that were in charge of these guys. So we got hold of his counselor and said, we need to talk to so-and-so. And he said, well, he's having free time right now. He can't come talk to any U.S. attorney. He said, you got 10 minutes to get that person here.
Off his free time.
Or you and I are going to have a problem, pal. So we came in, and the guy did talk to us. And it's interesting. All he ever wanted, and we had to clear it through the facility, all he kept asking for was, could you bring me a couple pouches of Red Man chewing tobacco? That's what he wanted.
No problem.
No problem.
We're happy.
No, we're happy.
We're happy to work that out.
Yeah. Now the bad news is he started running loads while he was in jail, so he got arrested again.
He's controlling it all.
I think he's since passed on.
Yeah. It's amazing some of the history.
Yeah. Lots of history down there.
Yeah, and I know you do a presentation. I think you got one coming up soon. But
yes,
we're going to actually have a couple nights here at the studio where you're going to present.
Correct.
We'd like to bring law enforcement or people in the community that want to know a little bit about that. So we'll post that up when it's available.
Yeah.
I watched his presentation. It's like amazing. It's like so to think that you have airplanes landing on streets that are so busy right now. Everglades Boulevard.
Yeah.
DeSoto. Yeah. 41. Just to see the history of Collier County and what it was about. It was like you said. I think you told me today it was like the Wild Wild West.
It was. Yeah. I mean, we were always gone. I mean, we covered the whole Caribbean. All the way down to South America. I mean, there were times when we would go to the islands and set up on the islands as offloaders, and we would send boats out to pick up loads. I know we took trips down. One trip we took down, we were on the Cayman Islands for 10 days. We had an airplane and boats, and we were talking to the Colombian importers, and we would send the boats out to pick the load up and bring it unloaded off the west coast of Florida.
Unbelievable. That's why you got so much muscles.
Yeah.
All those bales back in the day. Yeah, no, it's amazing. Amazing stories. Tom, I'd like to thank you. Just amazing stuff what you did in law enforcement. And I think probably it kind of formed and basically cultivated Collier County, and probably if you guys didn't do what you did back then, things would probably look a little bit different in this county.
I think they would be a lot different in this county.
It's
we
doubt.
It was hard work. I think it was justified, and it probably in the long run has turned some folks around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been great. It's good to have you in. Anytime you want to come in. 50 years of law enforcement, 49 and a half almost. And are you gonna do it again, you think? Or because I know Tom's a great weather person, very knowledgeable, been in law enforcement, knows every layer of law enforcement. How is well, I got you. How has law enforcement changed? I mean, we just got done about a year ago, and compared to what you did back in the day, how's that?
When I first came on, this is interesting. First, I came on in the department full time in 1972, as I told you. No assigned cars. The same car was on the road 24/7. No portable radios. No benefits other than insurance. We had to pay 8% of our salary towards retirement. No overtime. If you stayed like working 311 and the 11 to 7 shift was short, a man or two, and they asked you to stay over, and you'd stay over till 3-4 o'clock till all the bars shut down, and things started quieted down. You didn't get paid for that. We were happy to do it.
Yeah, your duty. Yeah.
We were happy to do it. And I worked K-9 back in those days, so I worked 6 at night till 2 in the morning. And I can tell you, many nights I'd stay out till 7 o'clock until the day shift would take over, just because everybody was busy. And I was the only dog out. I was on call 24/7 back in the 70s, around 73. When I was assigned K-9, I had the only shepherd out on the street.
Amazing stories.
And if you look over the years, the technology, look inside one of these cars. The technology will floor you. It's almost like the cockpit of an airplane. You got your laptop, you got your camera, you got your body cams, you've got all kinds
driver's
of
license readers.
Oh yeah, you got driver's license, you got the printer, you got all that stuff. Back in those days, we had a shotgun and a Motorola Motrack radio, and that was it.
And 2 tin cans of the string.
Yeah, and sometimes that didn't work. There were parts in the county, if you got out close to the Miami-Dade line on 41, you couldn't talk.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. I remember when I started out in the Marine Patrol, the dispatch was in Tampa after 5, and they would page you so you can go to a cell phone
and call it
to talk. Not a cell phone hardly. It was basically you kept coins, and to think of that safety situation back then, it was crazy.
And we're as you know, we've always had single man cars.
Yeah. Well, great information, Tom. Again, Captain Tom Storrar, retired, but the guy's always ready. He's always ready. It's good. All right, 239 Uncensored, everything Southwest Florida and beyond. Thank you so much. And we always do a little fist bump, and we are out. Thanks a lot, Tom. Great having you on.